And that was Dada Man. You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a retrospective review of the movie Jacob's Ladder. And I watched it on Friday night and I deeply regretted doing so. Because it was like, I just wanted something nice to watch on a Friday night, and it was like a combination of Requiem for a Dream and Uncut Gems. Just like this horrendously intense, unrelentingly depressing nightmare. I was so glad when it was over. The director Adrian Lyne's got a really fascinating filmography of a lot of films that are analogous to each other in certain ways. Maybe not his first big hit, Flashdance, but 9.5 Weeks and Fatal Attraction followed. Then Jacob's Ladder, then Indecent Proposal, Lolita and Unfaithful. And he went off and did other things for about 20 years. He did come back recently with a very, very underappreciated, not underappreciated, as in it's good, but apparently it's awful, film called Deep Water with Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas in it. But Jacob's Ladder was a film that everyone saw when I was at school, and it became this trendy, psychedelic 60s sort of post Platoon and pre The Sixth Sense sort of film, which was a sort of horror, twisty horror film, and ended up being hugely influential on a lot of what would come after, particularly the movies of M. Night Shyamalan. I've never managed to say it correct. But movies like The Sixth Sense, where there's this sort of otherworldly dread, where the characters exist in this netherworld, and the video game series Silent Hill, it became extremely influential. And it's like Tim Robbins' other more successful film, The Shawshank Redemption, had a similar arc, which was that it was a reasonable but mild success on release, but then sort of generated this latent cult status. And the fact that it was deemed a little bit of a failure on release in cinematic terms, I don't think is fair, because if you look at this film, how the hell it made any money at all is completely baffling. It is extremely challenging fare and left my nerves shredded. But it's also really quite profound, and it moved me a lot more than I expected, even though I was extremely happy that it finished. The sort of final third on it, everything sort of came together and calmed down and became a lot more sort of beatific, and it's a film about Tim Robbins, who is a postman, and it starts in Vietnam. And his troop in Vietnam are all doing the usual sitting around, talking crap about each other sort of routine, and then they come under attack. But when they come under attack, all of his troops start having convulsions and all these weird things happening to them. And it jumps forward in time, and you see that he gets stabbed in the stomach quite badly. And it jumps forward in time. Tim Robbins is living with a wonderful Elizabeth Pena, and in New York, and he's a postman. He's a doctor in something or other. He's got a PhD, but Vietnam has left him shattered, and we pull the pieces together that he's sort of been seeing psychiatrists post-Vietnam and doesn't want to think anymore. And the opening scene with him is a harbinger of the nightmare world that he lives in, which is he has a very strange occurrence on a train coming home from his postman job in the early hours of the morning, where a couple of weird things happen on the train, and when he gets off at the station, he finds the station is all locked up, and he almost dies trying to get out of the station, and makes it back home to his long-suffering girlfriend. Wonderful performance by Elizabeth Pena there as Jezebel. And the rest of the movie is these events happening to him, which are psychedelic and nightmarish and surreal, increasing, and he feels like he's being chased by people, falling into sort of schizophrenia and paranoia, and the underlying thing that is going through his mind, particularly when other members of his troop in Vietnam come to him, is that day of the attack, something was going on, and they come to the conclusion that they were being given some form of medication or drugs by the army, which was leading them to now, years later, suffer these traumatic events in their lives. He goes to see a psychiatrist that he's been seeing for years and finds out the psychiatrist was killed in a likely car bomb. And then another one of his troop comes to see him in a bar, and his car's blown up with him in it as well, leading to them approaching George Costanza as a lawyer to try and find out. Like, one of the weirdest things in this film, given how nightmarish a lot of it is at the start, it's like really, really nightmarish, is him holding up a picture of his kid who'd been killed in a car accident. A car had run his child over in the street. And it's Macaulay Culkin. And like, Macaulay Culkin's in this film, and you just like spend the whole time looking at Macaulay Culkin going, what the hell? Because he's left, his wife has left him, and it's inferred that their relationship broke down in a large part to their son being killed, and now he's with his new girl and so on. And then he has these sort of back and forth dreams where he's actually back with his old wife, and he's sort of there's a part in the film where you're kind of like wondering, actually, is he with his old wife? And he's dreamt. So he wakes up in the middle of the night, bathed in sweat, and he's, I dreamt I was with the Elizabeth Pena girl and that we'd split up and all of this. And then he's back with her, and it's all very, very nightmarish and surreal and destabilizing mentally and traumatic to watch. This is, I thought, an amazing film. It didn't get brilliant reviews, but it became a cult film. And I kind of think for the wrong reasons. I kind of feel like it became a cult film in the way that The Sixth Sense did. But The Sixth Sense doesn't have any wider philosophical meaning for me. It's really just almost a whodunit. But here I found the movie to be unexpectedly soulful and profound. It's a mediation on us going towards death. I hope I've got I wonder if I've got the quote, because there's a quote in the movie that is really actually moving. I'll keep looking for it. It's shot wonderfully well. I think Adrian Lyne's mood, the mood that he creates here, really is sort of redolent to a New York of something almost like The French Connection. It's really nicely shot. It's hard to watch because it's him losing his mind, and it's quite clear that he's losing his mind, but it builds up to this sort of twin story. One is of him losing the plot and losing his mind, and the other is of what the American military did to in Vietnam. And a lot of the more clandestine things that they've done that haven't really been acknowledged enough. But there's a quote in it from a wonderful Daniel Aiello performance. He's brilliant. He shows up towards the end with a quote. The only thing that burns in hell is a part of you that won't let go of life, your memories, your attachments. They burn them all away, but they're not punishing you, he said. They're freeing your soul. So if you're frightened of dying, you're holding on. You'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth. I was unexpectedly nearly in tears at the end of this film. It becomes a very sort of beautiful meditation on accepting death. And it's unexpectedly powerful. I think this is a really underrated film. It had so many things pulling in different directions. The notion of someone losing their mind, the notion of a massive government cover-up, the notion of dealing with death and relationships, and the death of his son. Tim Robbins is wonderful in the role. He often plays roles where he's a little bit quiet and doesn't really seem to do much, but he's a lot more sort of emotionally animated here than he is in the Shawshank Redemption. And I thought it was very interesting because I left the film like both feeling the emotional impact, the philosophical impact, and also being fascinated by what the American government did to their soldiers. And apparently it was influential on a very famous CNN documentary from the end of the 90s, which resulted in a huge court case. And it was about the American military going into Laos, which was illegal. They weren't even at war in Laos. And initially it was reported that they'd gone into this valley, subsequently called the Valley of Death, and accidentally come across this cache of all this information. And in trying to get out, they needed lots of air support and everything, because they became under attack from a lot of the Lao forces that were sort of on side with the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese. And it sort of came, CNN made this documentary because it came out, I think it was Operation Tailwind or something like that, that there's this whole counter-espionage part of the American military that does really weird stuff, very Manchurian candidate stuff. And that the documentary claimed that basically the American military had gone in there because there was a massive camp of deserted American GIs that they then used sarin gas on, which is mind-blowing stuff. And even though CNN ended up having to retract everything they said, the upshot was that it was broadly true. And I think that this film sort of points to the fact that there are these clandestine parts of the American military that do a lot of weird psychological stuff with drugs on their own soldiers and on civilian populations. They killed hundreds of children and civilians with sarin gas during this attack, which is against all international law. But that's one side of this fascinating film. And it sort of led me off down these rabbit holes to read up stuff that's pretty well established. But the other is about his character and the idea and notion of acceptance of a death you can't avoid. And it ends in really, it's like the mundanity of the final scene as well is quite amazing. I thought this is an incredible film, much more than the sum of its parts. It doesn't deserve to be sidelined as some sort of supernatural psychological thriller. It's a lot more profound than that. So I'm going to give Jacob's Ladder, and I warn you, if you found like films like Uncut Gems anxiety inducing to watch, this is up there. It's a difficult film to get through. It does give you relief in the final quarter. It's got a lot of soul in that final quarter, which I found quite revelatory and actually very moving. Like I said, it almost moved me to tears, which I didn't expect or sign up for, and I didn't sign up for the hell of going through it to get there either. So I'm going to give Jacob's Ladder a 9 out of 10. I thought it was a really strong film.